I came across an article recently that was published on the Food Lies Substack. A good Substack if you ever want to keep up with sort of, we'll say, sanity-related takes on the proper human diet, even if it's not completely a carnivore Substack. It's still a pretty good one to read. And they ask a very basic question that many of us have asked, and I think I want to give my 2 cents to this. And the question is, why are people tricked so easily into the thinking plant-based diets are healthy? Because we know they're not. We know that something like 80% of people who are very serious about attempting a plant-based diet quit within 3 months because their health just goes down the toilet. So we know that happens. That's undeniable. Now, a lot of the attrition from plant-based diets for those new people is simply because, like any other lifestyle change, we see this in the carnivore space, we see this in low carbs, everything, that most people who start a new diet fail. In fact, there's, almost like a yo-yo effect. You're familiar with yo-yo dieting, right? People lose the weight, gain it, lose the weight, regain it, repeat ad nauseum. Well, there's also the fall off the wagon, get back on the horse over and over and over again, endless cycle until something sticks that you see in a lot of dieting. And I don't think we're talking about that here, because when they quit plant-based diets, they quit them. They don't ever go back. They never try to go back. This isn't, many of you watching this probably, maybe you keep to a carnivore diet now, you didn't before, and maybe you at one time tried and failed and you're back to it now, or maybe you're in between, attempts to try to get back to it. We're not talking that. These are people who walk away from veganism forever, or plant-based diets in general. So how are people tricked? And so the author gives you 3 of them, and I'm going to give at least one more answer to this question. So their first reason is that, 1, follow the money. And as he says, quote, "I've always said the profit's in the processing. The notion that plant-based equals health has trillions of dollars backing it. Companies are cashing in on high profit margin products like bags and boxes of plant-based paste and goop. The industry thrives on the idea that meat and fat are bad, so their quote-unquote low-calorie concoctions must be good. This message has been making these corporations a lot of money for a long time. They spend billions to keep this narrative at the forefront of popular culture." End quote. And of course, let's expand on that idea, because it's not only the processed food companies doing this, because if you eat that stuff, you get a whole host of problems after a while. And then they blame it on meat, right? All the cholesterol stuff, that's not the cause of the meat, that's the cause of the carbs interacting with the meat, with the Randall cycle and other things. But then they will, other industries, I will not name explicitly, but you know who I'm talking about here, they will sell you the remedy for it, a remedy you can never quit, that you have to keep on some variation of, for the rest of your probably going to be short life, because you adopted a terrible diet, either the standard American diet, or you went to something else that destroys your health. And now you've got a whole bunch of these extra things that you have to take every single day that your doctor gave you. There are trillions of dollars in this. Trillions of them. If you want to talk about, alternative hypotheses, secretive plans and reasons for this, number 1 is money. It's not that secret. People are profit-driven monsters. Now, the second reason he gives is the honeymoon phase, and this one we're all very familiar with, right? I don't even need to quote him on this. The honeymoon phase. His point is, you go from the standard American diet to we're eating a lot of processed foods, and you go to a relatively clean plant-based diet. Yeah, it's going to pay dividends for you, at least for a while. I mean, after all, you're not eating a bunch of chemicals anymore. Again, this is a relatively clean version. You're not eating processed stuff. Maybe the most processed stuff you're eating is bean curd, tofu and that kind of thing. But otherwise, you're eating a whole food diet. That is always an improvement over eating a highly processed diet. It just is. And so for a while, you're going to see improvements. But it's called a honeymoon phase for a reason. After a while, reality sets in. And this is where the 3-month mark seems to hit for people, because it seems the honeymoon phase for most people who fail on plant-based diets, they hit that 3-month mark or so, and well before that, the honeymoon phase ends, and all of a sudden now they're low energy, or their hair's falling out, or whatnot, and they can't go through. To be fair, we see some of this in the carnivore space too. We have to admit ourselves. How many times have you seen videos from people saying how to deal with hair loss on the carnivore diet, or heart palpitations or things? And frankly, a lot of the bigger name influencers in this space don't address those problems when they're actually not that hard to deal with. Hair loss is a collagen problem or a protein problem. Some people go 80% fat and it doesn't do well for them. I probably can't do that. I may fine-tune things for a bit here and try that, although I don't know how I'd get to 80% fat, honestly. But I may try that just as a weight loss thing to really kick that ketosis in. But beyond that, we see this as it doesn't work for everybody and can cause problems. Hair loss because they're not getting enough protein or collagen, heart palpitations because they're not getting enough sodium and electrolytes, a few other things. And a lot of that stuff kicks in when the honeymoon phase ends. This is true for everybody, and we need to be honest with ourselves about it, and it's really true in the plant-based world as well, because our solutions in the carnivore space to the honeymoon phase ending problems aren't the same as they are in the plant-based world. They're a lot harder in the plant-based world. We advocate here minimal supplementation. Creatine, a wonderful thing, especially if you're at the gym and for cognitive function. Creatine is wonderful. You might be hard-pressed to find another one you really need, except some electrolyte packets or something. But his third point is nature's fallback plan. We're going to just quote him directly here again. So, quote, "The most significant reason for the persistence of the plant-based myth lies in our evolutionary history. For millions of years, humans and their ancestors have roamed the earth in search of animals, and we were very good at acquiring them. We could hunt the largest of mammoths down to the smallest of lizards. Despite being proficient hunters, there were occasions when hunts failed or adverse climatic conditions made animal food scarce. This is when we were forced to rely on gathered plant foods. This fallback diet keeps us alive in hard times. One of the things that have kept us alive and reproducing all these years is the ability to survive on this fallback diet. It's a true miracle of Mother Nature. We take lower quality foods and eke out enough nutrition to survive. There's nothing wrong with plant foods, they just aren't the primary option for what humans need to build their bodies, organs, and brains. With enough variety of these survival foods, we can piece together enough nutrition to not die. Maybe we had to do this for an entire season. If there was a really horrendous natural disaster, maybe we'd have low amounts of animal-based nutrition for an entire year, but we lived on. Nowadays, we have people taking this fallback plan, this evolutionary hack, and trying to live off of it for decades. It can keep them alive for quite some time, but the consequences are slow and disastrous. There are endless examples of people slowly losing their health without realizing it while doing, quote, all the right things, dutifully sticking with these plant-based diets. These people are admirable trying to do something for their health, but they really are sadly on a slow road to poor health. End lengthy quote. And then you add in, of course, the people who are willing to sell you the solutions to all the consequences of that, right? And how all the money they make. And you combine it with the propaganda pushed by, in the first phase of this, the private enterprises making all the money. But he left out one. He left out one reason. And we're going to briefly talk about that here. And if you've watched a lot of my videos, you're probably waiting for this one. And that's the politics of this. There are a whole host of political actors out there from these large international organizations who are pushing this because of power. They want power. They want centralization. They want control. And what more intimate thing can you do to control people, to keep them on a tight leash, than control their access to food? This is why you see suddenly a big push for electronic currency now. That's a thing virtually every government, including my own, are talking about implementing the next few years. Purely electronic currency. You see this with the big push for, restricting the amount of meat people can have. You see these organizations openly talk about this. They ask governments for the power to do this. They're going to have a hard time with that in America, but eventually they will try it somehow. I'm confident that they're going to try it. I expect they'll find much greater resistance than they think they're going to, unless they manage to break society somehow. But there's politics to this. Remember, money isn't actually the most pernicious thing in all this. It's just the most nakedly base motivation for most people. But there's a higher order of evil involved in a lot of this. Yes, I'm making a moral judgment here. Evil, and that's power. Power can get you things that money can't. And there's a lot of people who want power here. And so, of course, they help the private enterprise folks push things for them. And remember, the sort of parasitic relationship that a lot of the capitalist endeavors have, where they practically buy a politician, usually one of each party. You can go look at who gives money to, just pick random member of Congress, for instance, from one party and the other. Look to see who donates money to them, and you're going to find a lot of the same from each party, from one party to the other. It's like they hedge their bets. That's why a lot of things don't get done there. It's something to pay attention to, by the way, is this farm bill that they've been talking about quietly behind the scenes rolls out, because I've seen vegan news outlets talk about how the coming farm bill is going to help them promote plant-based programs. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So to share this on social media, that helps too. I'm Anthony Stine, Practical Carnivore. Thanks for tuning in.